Hello, my name is Vince O'Connor, and I am the historian for the Filipino Association for Health Careers. October is Filipino American History Month, so in commemoration of the hardships and achievements of various Filipino Americans, LJ Kabataye, Gabby Son, and I have been working on a project highlighting their experiences within health. So halika na, kapamilya. I will first give a brief background of the history of immigration for Filipino Americans. Historically speaking, Filipinos first started immigrating to America during the Spanish rule via the Manila Galleons, or Spanish trading ships. These Filipino seamen brought exotic goods such as silk, spices, and ivory from China to Mexico and California. The next biggest wave of immigration for Filipinos came during the early 1900s when Filipino laborers were recruited to work as cheap labor in Hawaii. These workers, called sakadas, were paid the lowest among ethnic groups working in these plantations because Philippines became a U.S. colony during this time, allowing employers to easily import Filipino laborers. Filipinos also got rewarded through their services in World War II. Filipinos famously fought with General Douglas MacArthur to capture major victories against the Japanese forces in World War II. These men who served in the war were then given the option to becoming a U.S. citizen. Along with that, the wives had the opportunity to immigrate to the U.S. with their military husbands. Many Filipinos took advantage of this opportunity and migrated to the U.S. The last major influx of Filipinos migrating to the U.S. came when the Immigration Act of 1965 was enacted. This essentially allowed all immigrants, not just European Americans, to become citizens of the U.S. This imminent act on immigration policy opened the doors for families of Filipino immigrants to be united with their families and simply have the right to become a citizen, not through labor or services. However, something that was not really mentioned while chronologically explaining Filipino immigration was health, whether Filipino Americans received any form of health care, or whether they significantly suffered from any mental or physical health complications. To put it into context, healthcare was unregulated, and health insurance was non-existent in the early 1900s. Most patients would be treated by doctors in their homes, and going to the hospital was only for people who were able to pay the absurd out-of-pocket payments. In addition to that, people did not think paying out-of-pocket was worth it, since hospitals lacked any sort of technology to diagnose different illnesses. It wasn't until World War II when Blue Cross and Blue Shield, the first forms of regulated health insurance, came into existence. This was also a time where employers could offer benefits such as health insurance to their employees based on their wages. However, the biggest achievement in promoting health insurance for all citizens was when Congress enacted Medicaid and Medicare, which provided insurance for the elderly and the poor. Now, where do Filipino Americans come into play? When Filipinos immigrated to Hawaii, they had no way of getting to the hospitals despite suffering persistent manual labor and work injuries. Because they were not able to afford out-of-pocket payments, they continued to practice their native medicine as home remedies. Aside from using medicinal plants and herbal teas and creams, Filipinos brought a unique perspective of health to America. They believed in ideas such as the concept of timbang, which determines one's health based on humoral balances in the body and food and dieting. They also strongly believed that supernatural beings and evil spirits played a factor into why people became sick in the community. The hilot was one of the few cultural healers that could counteract these illnesses through herbal plants and intercession of prayers. However, as technology progressed and as more Filipinos immigrated to the U.S., less people continued to practice these home remedies and turned their attention to Western medicine. Filipino Americans first started receiving insurance when the government allowed employers to provide health benefits for their employees around the 1940s. But bear in mind, only a selected few Filipinos received health insurance from the time employees first received health insurance to the time Medicaid and Medicare first became approved. Many Filipinos who qualified for health insurance through work did not receive health insurance due to workplace discrimination, lack of education in the healthcare system, and mistrust of doctors working in these hospitals. A lot has changed since Filipinos first started coming in waves to the U.S. Many policies have been implemented to help Filipino immigrants succeed in the U.S., especially in accessing health insurance. Today, Filipino Americans represent a large percentage of healthcare professionals. And since 1990, Philippines have consistently been one of the largest foreign-born groups in the United States. Now let's take a first-hand look at Filipino Americans' first-hand experience with healthcare in the U.S.
My name is Alex Gonzaga. I'm a senior here at the University of Washington, and I am a physics major with a concentration in biophysics. I'm looking to become a pediatrician, and my dad is from Manila. My mom is from Quezon City.
My name is LJ Kabutahe, and I am a Bachelor of Science in Public Health major with an intended career track as being a pediatrician, maybe going into pediatric oncology. My parents are from, well, my mom is from Makati, which is like Tagalog, and my dad is from Cagayan, which is Ilocano, so I'm half and half Tagalog and Ilocano.
My name is Christian Carmen. I'm a junior at the UW. I'm pursuing nursing with a minor of diversity. My mom, she's from the provinces.
My name is Jonathan Ariel Solomon, but most people call me John. I am a coordinator for a program called LSAMP, the Lewis Stokes Alliance for Minority Participation. We're a program that provides support for underrepresented students that are pursuing degrees in STEM. I was born in the US. I was born in Van Nuys, California, but moved to Seattle, Washington when I was 2. My mom's dad is from Tuguegarao in the Philippines. My dad's side of the family is from Antipolo, or from Tarlac, and then Antipolo in close to Manila.
My name is Leanna Tree. I'm a junior majoring in chemistry. I'm following a pre-pharm track, so hoping to be a pharmacist of some sort. Provide families from Longyan, part of my mom's family, but I'm not sure where like the other half is from.
Dito magpala, intended major is public health. I'm from Palawan in the Philippines.
I do have health insurance. Fortunate to have it from my mom. She has it from her work and stuff.
I personally do have health insurance. I've been very fortunate to be born into a family where my dad had very secure health insurance under his company, and he basically covers everybody on my family.
The thing about that, yes, I do have health insurance, but recently I found out that I didn't have health insurance for like a good 3 months. And I found that out by getting my TB shot at the local health clinic over here at UW. I found out my dad he works at Boeing, and I guess they offer like really cheap health insurance and dental insurance. And when I went to get my TB shot, my mom gave me my the code, the number to it, and it said it was denied, and it was denied since January. We thought that my dad just didn't want to give us health insurance because he's cheap, but we found out that he was laid off recently, and it was kind of hard for him to say that.
Stay peripherally aware of what's going on with healthcare in the US, especially because like I have family and relatives that are self-employed entrepreneurs that rely on those exchanges to have healthcare for them and their families. Right. And so like that's always kind of top of mind of me, like, oh, I work for the university, so I get healthcare through them, but for them, since they're independent business owners, like that's something that's always at like the forefront of their mind. Mm-hmm. So I always like at least try to keep up to date on that.
I know that especially in the Philippines, where health insurance isn't really the norm, and a lot of things are paid out of pocket. Going to the doctor is seen as a privilege for people that can afford it, whereas here, I'm reluctant to go see the doctor, and I think it took me a while to realize that in itself is a privilege, and that I have the choice of just not wanting to go because I don't need to go, whereas people all over the world need to go but they can't go.
I think healthcare is something that we do like take for granted, and I think because it's so hard to it's so hard to recognize your privilege once you have it, because you can't imagine living without that privilege. And so like today I was talking to my friend, and she said she's been sick for like the whole week, and that she has a fever for 3 days now, and that's usually like, you know, something that we go to the doctor for, but she can't because she just immigrated, and so she didn't have health insurance yet, and it would be very expensive to just go into the
Pay
doctor.
out of pocket.
Yeah, and pay out of pocket.
Yeah, easier to connect to, and he's very friendly, cracks a lot of jokes, and you know, I would say that we have a pretty informal relationship. It's not just like a doctor to patient kind of relationship.
Okay, so I have a dentist that I've been seeing since I was like a small child. Like I've been going to the same practice since I was really, really little. Them, I can basically tell everything just because I've built up that relationship with them.
Recently when I went, I've noticed that privacy is a big thing with them. They always ask, like, when it comes to personal things, they would ask me for my consent. And I think that's really awesome. I think that's really cool. There was not a time I felt uncomfortable around my doctor.
I think it can get hectic, but from what I've seen so far, these people have been working in the field for so long that even like seeing doctors, you know, when there was an interpretation problem, they were like able to, they didn't have to call somebody else to do it for them. They were able to, you know, to solve that problem like in a snap.
Seems like, I don't know, it just seems like a really good environment. There's never anyone like walking around like angry or like sad or anything, you know?
So the staff is very organized. A lot of them are very independent, but with that independence, they're also very welcoming.
I've seen, like for example, my sister got hives one time, and obviously that's like an allergic reaction. But at the time they were like, oh, like you probably stepped on like someone or like something, a spirit, and I was like, really?
Just like rub my back with like baby oil, do a quick prayer, and like, you know, it's, I don't know if it's a placebo effect or something, but
yeah.
honestly I felt really good. I went to school like,
I definitely feel that.
something like that. And also Vicks is a big thing too. Just like grab it, just like I'm gonna put it in my nostrils, and then like it was like so like
Forehead too.
yeah, forehead, the back,
Yeah.
lower back.
When my Lola was sick before she passed away, like she received excellent health care from her doctors. When my Lola was sick, when he was in the Philippines, he received excellent health care from his doctors. Really, the cases of discrimination that I hear about now, because more of my friends are nurses, doctors, dentists, like I remember a story where one of my friends was completing one of his assistantships, and one of his older patients told him straight to his face, like, I don't want to be treated by you, like, please let me see somebody else.
Yeah.
And later on he told me, he was like, you know what, I get it. It was an older woman, I'm not going to take offense to it, but I do think that perception does still persist, like, oh, you know, a Filipino healthcare worker is not as good as a white American healthcare worker. Even when the standards are just as high or higher, or even when the credentials are present, like I do think that's a pervasive kind of myth and prejudice that does still exist.
In this country, I don't think that Filipinos experience as much racism or discrimination as maybe a Black American or a Muslim American, especially in times like this.
As you can see, Filipinos today have more faith and trust in doctors. Almost all Filipinos have health insurance through work or Medicaid, and more Filipinos are slowly becoming involved and accepted in healthcare. With that all said, like many minorities, Filipino immigrants still experience cultural and language barriers between their doctors, and discrimination and racism is still prevalent. But as dogs, we will continue to push for accessibility and equality in healthcare, not just for Filipinos, but for all people.
One word to describe what it means to be a dog. Hustle.
In one word, dogs are resilient.
Resilience.
Resilience.
To be persistent.
To be a dog, driven. Yeah, that's what I said.